It is the 5th century BCE, and Athens, jewel of the ancient Greek world, is at a crossroads. For decades the city has thrived. Under the leadership of Pericles, it became a beacon of art, culture, and democratic governance. The Parthenon stands tall on the Acropolis. Tragedians like Sophocles and Euripides draw vast crowds to the amphitheaters. Sculptors carve the divine into marble, and philosophers begin to ask questions that challenge myth and custom. But this golden age does not last. The Peloponnesian War breaks out between Athens and its rival Sparta, dragging on for nearly 30 years. It brings devastation, famine, and plague. Confidence in democracy begins to erode as the people, desperate for stability, swing between mob rule and tyranny. It is a time of confusion, anxiety, and unrest. Amid this turbulence, one man stands out: Socrates. He does not write books, he does not charge fees, he simply walks the streets of Athens, asking questions. What is justice? What is virtue? What does it mean to live well? His relentless pursuit of truth irritates many. He exposes the ignorance of those in power, challenges tradition, and refuses to flatter the city's elite. In 399 BCE, Athens puts him on trial. The charges: corrupting the youth and impiety. He is found guilty by a narrow margin. Given the chance to flee, he chooses death, drinking hemlock in the company of friends. He dies a martyr for reason. Watching all of this is a young man named Plato. Born into an aristocratic family, Plato is brilliant, idealistic, and deeply affected by the loss of his mentor. He sees in Socrates something rare, a man willing to suffer for the truth. But he also sees the failure of democracy, a system that could not tell the difference between a demagogue and a sage. This is the seed of Plato's philosophy. He turns inward and upward. In the aftermath of war and injustice, he begins to imagine a world beyond the senses, a world of perfect, eternal truths, the forms. He starts to question not just politics or ethics, but the very nature of reality itself. What is real? What is good? Can we trust our senses? Is there a kind of knowledge that never changes? Plato's work cannot be separated from his time. He is responding to trauma, the trauma of a broken city, a failed system, and the loss of his teacher. But he is also reaching beyond it. He wants to rebuild, not just the city, but the soul. He inherits a philosophical lineage from the pre-Socratics, who pondered the cosmos, and from Socrates, who turned philosophy inward. But Plato is the first to bring it all together, to create a system that unifies ethics, metaphysics, epistemology, aesthetics, and political theory. He writes not in treatises, but in dialogues, lively conversations that invite the reader in. We meet Socrates again and again in these pages, asking the same urgent questions. The dialogues are not just teachings, they are invitations to think, to doubt, to seek. Plato also founds the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the West. His most famous student is Aristotle. Between them, they define the foundations of Western thought for the next 2,000 years. But Plato is not merely a historical figure, he is timeless. His philosophy speaks to anyone who has felt disillusioned by the world, anyone who has sought justice in an unjust society, anyone who has asked quietly at night, what is true, what is good, what should I believe in? In Plato's world, the senses deceive, but the mind can liberate. Truth is not always visible, but it is always there, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look inward and upward. This is where our journey begins. Chapter 1: Knowledge and the Realm of Forms. Part 1: Plato's foundational distinction: appearance versus reality. We begin with a central problem that shaped Plato's philosophy, the problem of change and permanence. The world as we perceive it through the senses is in a constant state of flux. People age, cities crumble, the seasons shift, and no two moments are ever exactly alike. If we rely only on our senses, we live in a world where nothing is stable, and truth becomes elusive, a moving target. Yet we speak and think as if some things are unchanging. We talk about justice, beauty, or goodness as if they have a consistent meaning. But what is justice itself, apart from individual acts that may or may not reflect it? What is beauty itself, distinct from a painting, a flower, or a face that we find beautiful? Plato's philosophical breakthrough was to suggest that we live simultaneously in two worlds. One is the physical world, the world of appearances, that we access through sight, touch, and sound. The other is the intelligible world, the world of reason, which we access only through the intellect. This second world is what Plato called the world of forms. The forms, or ideas from the Greek eidos, are not mental constructs or abstractions. They are, for Plato, real, more real than anything in the physical world. The form of beauty is not a beautiful object, but the very standard by which beauty is measured. The form of justice is not a just law, but the eternal blueprint of justice that transcends any particular society. Every object in our world, Plato argues, is merely a copy or a shadow of its corresponding form. A tree is beautiful because it reflects, however imperfectly, the form of beauty. A circle drawn in the sand is never perfect, but it reflects the form of circularity, the perfect, eternal idea of a circle. This distinction helps Plato explain why knowledge, true knowledge, must be about things that do not change. If knowledge is about reality, and reality is eternal and unchanging, then only the forms are proper objects of knowledge. Everything else, the shifting appearances of the material world, can only be the subject of opinion, not knowledge. The implications are vast. Plato is claiming that everything we experience with our senses is less real than the invisible forms we can only grasp with the mind. And it is by turning away from the senses and toward reason that we begin the path to true understanding. Part 2. The divided line and the allegory of the cave. To explain the difference between knowledge and opinion, and to help us understand how the mind can ascend toward truth, Plato offers a powerful visual model in the Republic, Book 6. It is known as the divided line. Picture a vertical line split into two major sections, the visible world below and the intelligible world above. Each of these two sections is further divided in half, resulting in 4 segments, each representing a different way of knowing. At the bottom is Acacia, the level of images and shadows. This is the world of illusions, reflections, and appearances, things we see in dreams or in mirrors. These are the least real and the least reliable. Just above that is Pistis, or belief, the world of physical objects, trees, rocks, bodies, houses. These things are more real than shadows, but are still subject to change and decay. Knowledge at this level is stronger than illusion, but still not stable. It's the realm of common opinion. Above the line, in the intelligible realm, we move into dianoia, or thought. This level includes mathematical reasoning and abstract hypotheses. Think of geometry, astronomy, or number theory. These involve unchanging truths, but we still rely on assumptions, diagrams, or examples to reason through them. At the top of the line is noesis, or pure understanding. This is the realm of the forms, known directly by the intellect, without reliance on images or physical examples. Here the soul grasps truth itself, especially the highest of all forms, the form of the good. But how does one move from the lowest to the highest levels of this line? To answer this, Plato offers perhaps his most famous metaphor, the allegory of the cave, found in Republic, Book 7. Imagine a group of people who have lived their entire lives chained inside a dark cave. They are bound in such a way that they can only look at a wall in front of them. Behind them is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners are people walking along a path, carrying objects. The fire casts shadows of these objects onto the wall, and the prisoners see only the shadows. To them, the shadows are reality. They name them, discuss them, even predict how they will move. They have no idea that what they're seeing are mere projections. Now imagine one prisoner is freed. At first, he's blinded by the light, but slowly, painfully, he turns his head, sees the fire, and eventually makes his way out of the cave. At first, the sunlight overwhelms him, but as his eyes adjust, he begins to see clearly. Not just the reflections on the water, but the real objects, and finally, the sun itself. The sun, in Plato's metaphor, represents the form of the good, the ultimate source of truth, light, and reality. Part 3. The form of the good. The soul and recollection. At the very summit of Plato's metaphysical hierarchy is the form of the good. It is not simply one good thing among others, nor is it a moral commandment or personal virtue. It is rather the very condition that makes all knowledge, all being, and all truth possible. In the Republic, Book 6. Socrates tells Glaucon that just as the sun enables the eye to see and things to be seen, so too the form of the good enables the soul to know and forms to be knowable. Without the good, the other forms could not be understood. It is the cause of being, that which gives both existence and intelligibility to all else. But the good itself is beyond being. Plato uses that precise phrase. It is beyond being in dignity and power. What does this mean? It suggests that the good is not merely the most real thing. It is the source of reality itself. As the sun causes growth, light, and sight, yet is not itself sight, so the good causes knowledge and truth, but is itself greater than both. This idea is not just a philosophical abstraction. For Plato, the form of the good is the object of the highest kind of knowledge. It is what the philosopher ultimately seeks, the end point of the soul's long journey upward from the cave. But how does the soul begin that journey? How do we come to know anything at all about the forms when we live in a world of shadows? To answer this, Plato introduces a striking idea, the doctrine of recollection, or anamnesis. This teaching appears most clearly in the dialogues Meno and Phaedo. In it, Plato proposes that the soul is immortal, and that before it was joined with the body, it dwelled in the realm of the forms. There, it had direct access to all knowledge, the forms of justice, beauty, equality, number, and the good. But when the soul enters a physical body, it forgets what it once knew. The process of learning, then, is not the acquisition of new information, but the recollection of eternal truths. In his work, Meno, Socrates demonstrates this by questioning an uneducated slave boy, leading him step by step to uncover geometric principles he had never been taught. According to Socrates, the boy's success is not due to instruction, but to recollection. Proof that the soul carries latent knowledge from a prior existence. The implication is profound. The soul is not a blank slate, but an entity with a memory of truth. Philosophy, then, becomes a kind of remembering, a gentle turning of the mind back toward its true home. This doctrine ties together Plato's views on metaphysics, knowledge, and the soul's nature. We are not merely beings in the world. We are eternal souls who have temporarily forgotten who we are. Part 4. Education. dialectic and the philosopher's ascent. If knowledge is the recollection of eternal truths, and if the soul carries within it the memory of the forms, then education must be something far more profound than the accumulation of facts or skills. In Republic Book 7, Plato tells us that education is the art of turning the soul. It is not about pouring knowledge into the mind as one might fill an empty jar. Instead, it is the process of redirecting the soul from the world of becoming, the world of appearances, noise, and opinion, to the world of being, the world of essence, harmony, and truth. This redirection is not easy. The journey upward requires effort, patience, and a willingness to endure disorientation. The soul, like the eyes in the cave allegory, must adjust slowly to the light. It is not an immediate revelation, but a gradual awakening. The tool Plato offers for this ascent is called dialectic, a disciplined method of questioning that guides the soul from false opinions to true knowledge. Dialectic begins by challenging assumptions, dismantling contradictions, and exposing gaps in thought. But it does not stop at skepticism. It builds, step by careful step, toward a vision of the forms. At its highest level, dialectic reaches beyond all hypotheses to grasp the unconditioned, the absolute, the form of the good itself. For Plato, dialectic is not just a logical technique, it is a spiritual exercise, a cleansing of the intellect, a purifying fire through which the soul becomes capable of beholding the real. This is why Plato insists that only philosophers, those trained in dialectic and oriented toward the good, are fit to rule. Their authority does not come from wealth, force, or popularity, but from their alignment with truth. They are not rulers in the conventional sense, but guides of the soul, stewards of a just society rooted in the eternal principles of reason. Plato's view of the philosopher is not ivory-towered or aloof. The one who ascends must return to the cave. The soul that sees the light must descend again to help others ascend. This movement between realms, between knowing and teaching, between contemplation and action, is the rhythm of the philosopher's life. Ultimately, knowledge for Plato is not a possession, but a transformation. It is the awakening of the soul to its own nature, a reorientation from shadows to truth, from noise to harmony, from becoming to being. As we close this section, we carry with us the central insight of Plato's vision, that there is more to reality than what we see, and more to ourselves than what we remember. To know truly, we must turn inward and upward, toward the eternal, the unchanging, the good. Chapter 2, The Soul, Justice, and the Tripartite Self, Part 1, The Nature of the Soul in Plato's Philosophy. Plato's philosophical system is not just concerned with abstract truth, but with the human self, the soul. For him, knowledge, ethics, and politics all converge upon a single question: what is the nature of the soul? In seeking to answer this, Plato gives us one of his most enduring contributions to Western thought. In the Phaedo, and most systematically in the Republic, Plato presents the soul not as a simple or unified thing, but as something composite, with distinct inner forces. The soul is not a monolith, but a dynamic system, sometimes in harmony, often in tension. In Republic Book 4, Plato introduces the idea of the tripartite soul. He argues that just as a city has different classes with different roles, the individual soul has three distinct parts, each with its own desires, functions, and aims. The first part is reason, logos. It is the rational faculty of the soul, whose function is to seek truth and make wise judgments. It is reason that asks philosophical questions, pursues knowledge, and aims at the good. Reason is meant to govern. The second part is spirit, thumos. This is not emotion in general, but a specific kind of spiritedness, the seat of courage, indignation, pride, and ambition. Spirit responds to honor and shame, and it drives us to defend justice and resist wrongdoing. It allies naturally with reason when properly educated. The third part is appetite, epithumia. This is the desiring part of the soul, concerned with bodily pleasures and material needs, food, drink, sex, comfort, wealth. It is the largest and most unruly part, constantly demanding gratification. These three parts are always active in the soul, and their relationship determines the character of the person. When reason rules, spirit supports, and appetite obeys, the soul is in harmony, just as a well-ordered city is just when each class performs its role under the guidance of wisdom. This tripartite model is more than a metaphor. It is Plato's psychological foundation for moral philosophy. A just person is not simply someone who behaves well in society, but someone whose inner life is well governed, with each part of the soul fulfilling its function. He sees the soul not as naturally unified or virtuous, but as needing cultivation. The rational part must be educated to lead. The spirited part must be trained to follow reason, not appetite. And the appetites must be moderated, not suppressed entirely, but guided by discipline and wisdom. This internal struggle between higher and lower impulses, between reason and desire, is the battleground of ethics. And in Plato's view, it is also the site of justice, not only in the city, but in the self. Part 2. Justice as harmony, the city and the soul. In the Republic, Plato sets out to answer a profound question posed by Socrates' interlocutors. What is justice? Is it simply telling the truth and repaying debts? Is it helping friends and harming enemies? Or is justice, as Thrasymachus boldly claims, merely the advantage of the stronger, a tool used by the powerful to maintain control? Socrates rejects these definitions. Instead of starting with individual justice, he proposes to examine justice in the city, believing that justice will be easier to see on a larger scale before it is traced back to the individual soul. Thus, Plato constructs the idea of an ideal city, a Callipolis, from the ground up. This city, he argues, must be divided into three classes: rulers, the wise philosophical leaders who possess knowledge of the good; auxiliaries, the warriors, spirited and courageous, who defend the city and uphold the laws; producers, the artisans, farmers and merchants who provide for the material needs of society. Each class corresponds directly to a part of the soul: rulers to reason, auxiliaries to spirit, and producers to appetite. In the just city, each class performs its own function and does not interfere with the roles of the others. The rulers govern with wisdom, the auxiliaries enforce their judgments with courage, and the producers maintain the city's economy through their labor and moderation. Justice, then, is not defined by specific actions, but by internal order. It is a state in which each part does its proper work under the guidance of reason. Plato transfers this model directly to the soul. Just as justice in the city is a matter of each class knowing its place, so too justice in the individual is when each part of the soul is rightly ordered. Reason governs, seeking truth and guiding action. Spirit assists, upholding rational decisions with resolve. Appetite obeys, kept in check and nourished in moderation. This alignment creates a state of inner harmony. The soul is not torn by internal conflict. It becomes a symphony rather than a battlefield. In this view, injustice is disorder, when the appetites rebel, when spirit becomes unruly, or when reason is ignored or corrupted. A person ruled by appetite becomes enslaved to desire. A person ruled by spirit alone may become aggressive or honor-obsessed. Only the harmony of the parts leads to the well-ordered soul. What makes this account revolutionary is Plato's move away from justice as an external rule toward justice as an internal condition. Justice is not just about laws or social contracts. It is about the structure of the self. This vision lays the foundation for Plato's entire ethical and political philosophy. The good life is the just life. Part 3. Educating the soul. The formation of the philosopher. To maintain justice in both the city and the soul, Plato turns to what he believes is the true vehicle of transformation: education. In Republic, Book 7, he tells us that education is not about depositing information into an empty mind. Rather, it is the art of turning the soul. Just as a body can be turned to face the light, so too the soul can be turned toward truth, provided it is guided with care. This turning is not physical but psychic, an inner reorientation from the world of appearances to the world of forms. Plato introduces a structured path of education, especially for those destined to become philosopher rulers. This is not education as we typically imagine it. It is a long, arduous process of shaping the whole person. It begins with music and gymnastics in childhood, music for the soul, gymnastics for the body. Music here means exposure to noble stories, harmonies, and rhythms, cultivating emotional sensitivity and moral intuition. Gymnastics disciplines the body and fosters courage. Next comes mathematics, beginning around age 20. Arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and harmonics are not taught for their practical uses, but because they train the mind to think abstractly, to grasp eternal truths beyond the senses. At 30, those who excel continue into dialectic, the highest form of study. Dialectic teaches the soul to question assumptions, dismantle illusions, and pursue the ultimate principles of reality, especially the form of the good. But dialectic is dangerous without discipline. If pursued too soon, it can lead to cynicism or intellectual arrogance. So Plato insists it should come only after years of character formation. After this, the philosopher must spend 15 years applying knowledge in the real world, learning to govern and lead, before returning, around the age of 50, to contemplation and final rule. Why such a long journey? Because the soul must be prepared to govern itself before it governs others. Philosophy for Plato is not merely about ideas. It is about transforming the person into someone capable of truth, justice, and wise leadership. The goal is not simply to produce rulers, but to produce souls that are ruled by reason, supported by spirit, and freed from the tyranny of appetite. In other words, to produce human beings who embody the very justice they are meant to bring about in the world. The ideal ruler, then, is not the most ambitious or charismatic, but the one whose soul is most in harmony, who sees clearly and desires truth above all else. This is Plato's philosopher king, a soul trained in truth, tempered by experience, and illuminated by the good. Part 4. The collapse of the soul, injustice, and the tyrant within. For Plato, justice is fragile. It is not guaranteed by nature or imposed by force. It depends entirely on the proper ordering of the soul. And when that order begins to fail, the consequences are not only personal, but political. In Republic, Book 8, Plato outlines a vivid progression, a degeneration of regimes, and with them, a degeneration of the soul. The descent begins with timocracy, a regime ruled by honor and ambition. Here, reason is no longer in full control. Spirit becomes dominant. The soul is proud and competitive, valuing military strength and reputation over wisdom. This is the soul that admires order, but is ruled more by drive than by truth. Next comes oligarchy, rule by the wealthy few. In the soul, this manifests as the domination of appetite, especially for money. Spirit diminishes, reason is sidelined, and desire begins to pull the person towards self-interest. The soul becomes calculating, acquisitive, and cautious, obsessed with gain. From oligarchy descends democracy, a state of maximal freedom, but also disorder. The democratic soul is led by unruly desires. Every appetite claims equal status, from noble ambitions to base cravings. Discipline vanishes. The soul becomes a marketplace of competing urges, chasing novelty, rejecting restraint. Finally comes tyranny, the lowest and most corrupted form of both society and the self. The tyrannical soul is enslaved to a single, dominant desire. This craving, whether for power, pleasure, or control, consumes the entire being. Reason and spirit are utterly overthrown. The tyrant becomes not only unjust, but deeply miserable, torn by insatiable longing and paranoia. Plato does not simply present this descent as political commentary. It is a moral psychology. Each regime represents not just a type of city, but a type of person. The health of the soul reflects the health of the state. As above, so below. And just as justice is harmony, injustice is disharmony. The internal civil war of a soul at odds with itself. Yet even in this bleak picture, Plato holds out hope. The philosopher's soul, the just soul, can resist decline by staying oriented toward the form of the good. Through discipline, reason, and love of truth, the soul can remain intact, a beacon of order in a disordered world. This, for Plato, is the essence of the good life, not wealth, not power, not pleasure, but the inner harmony of a soul rightly ordered, a soul that remembers, a soul that governs itself, a soul that is free. Chapter 3. Plato's Political Vision, the Ideal State. Following on from what we have learned already about Plato's thoughts on knowledge, truth, the good, and the nature of the soul, we now turn to how these ideas form the foundation for his vision of the ideal political community, the state built on justice and harmony. Plato's philosophy is not confined to abstract contemplation. He believed that the insights gained about the soul and the forms must shape the way society is governed. For Plato, the city is a magnified soul, a collective organism whose health depends on the justice and order of its parts. At the heart of Plato's political thought is the question, how can a society be organized to promote the good life for all its citizens? His answer is radical and comprehensive. It requires a rigidly structured state, founded on the principle that each individual must do the work suited to their nature, and each part must contribute to the harmony of the whole. In the Republic, Plato sketches the blueprint of this ideal state. It is divided into three classes, reflecting the tripartite soul. Rulers, the philosopher kings, who govern with wisdom, understanding the forms, and especially the form of the good. Auxiliaries, warriors, who protect the state and enforce the ruler's decrees with courage and discipline. Producers, farmers, artisans, merchants, who supply the material needs of the city through their labor and skills. Justice in the city mirrors the justice in the individual soul. It arises when each class performs its appropriate role without interfering in the roles of others. The rulers do not meddle in production. The producers do not make laws. The auxiliaries do not seek power. This division creates a harmonious and well-ordered society. The rulers are not chosen by birth or wealth, but by their philosophical nature. They are trained rigorously, educated in dialectic and the forms, and uniquely capable of perceiving the good. They rule not for personal gain, but for the benefit of all. This vision contrasts sharply with the democratic systems familiar to Plato, which he saw as chaotic, unjust, and prone to factionalism. For Plato, democracy is a disorder in which everyone pursues their desires freely, leading to conflict and ultimately to tyranny. The philosopher king, by contrast, embodies reason elevated to its highest function, wise governance for the common good. Part 2. Property, Family, and Education in the Kallipolis. Plato's ideal city is striking, not only for its structure, but for its bold proposals regarding the very fabric of social life. To maintain justice and unity, he argues for a profound reorganization of property, family, and education, especially among the ruling and auxiliary classes. In this ideal state, the guardian class, comprising rulers and auxiliaries, will hold no private property. They are to live communally, without personal wealth or possessions to prevent conflicts of interest and corruption. Their focus must remain entirely on the welfare of the city, free from distractions or temptations. This rejection of private property is radical. Plato believed that wealth creates division, jealousy, and strife, which undermine the unity necessary for justice. By sharing all possessions, guardians live in common brotherhood, their loyalty rooted in the city itself, rather than individual gain. Similarly, Plato proposes a communal approach to family and child rearing for the guardian class. Traditional families, with their private interests and inheritances, risk factionalism. Instead, children of guardians are to be raised collectively, without knowledge of their biological parents. This, Plato argues, fosters equality and removes partiality, ensuring that all guardians think and act for the city as a whole. Of course, this communal approach is limited to the guardian class. The producers maintain private property and traditional family life, as their role is to provide economic stability and sustenance. Education plays a central role in this political vision. From early childhood, citizens are trained to fulfill their social roles. The guardians receive the most rigorous and extended education, beginning with physical training and music, advancing through mathematics and dialectic, as we saw previously. This education shapes character, intellect, and moral disposition, preparing them for leadership. The auxiliaries also undergo physical and military training to develop courage and discipline, while producers focus on vocational skills. By carefully directing education, Plato believes the city ensures that each individual develops the qualities suited to their class, leading to the harmonious functioning of the whole. This vision reflects Plato's belief that the good city cannot emerge from the free will of its citizens alone, but requires deliberate design and guidance, a political order rooted in philosophy. Part 3. Democracy, Political Decay, and the Rise of Tyranny. Building upon our understanding of Plato's ideal state, ruled by philosopher kings with a strict social order, we now turn to his critique of existing political systems, particularly democracy, and the inevitable cycle of degeneration that leads to tyranny. In the Republic Books 8 and 9, Plato describes a political decay that moves through predictable stages, each reflecting a deterioration in justice and order, both in the city and the soul. He begins with timocracy, a government motivated by honor and military success. While better than other flawed regimes, timocracy still reflects a weakening of reason's rule, as spirited ambition begins to dominate. From there, the city deteriorates into oligarchy, ruled by the wealthy. Here, desire for money and property becomes paramount, causing social divisions and unrest. Oligarchy parallels a soul ruled by appetite and avarice, lacking harmony. Next, democracy arises as the many overthrow the oligarchs, championing freedom and equality. While this might sound desirable, Plato sees democracy as a regime of excessive liberty, a state where all desires are given free rein. This leads to disorder, with citizens pursuing their individual whims without restraint or respect for authority. In democratic societies, Plato warns, people become distracted by superficial pleasures and demagogues exploit their desires, undermining true knowledge and wisdom. The excess of freedom breeds chaos, and from this chaos emerges tyranny, the worst and most oppressive form of government. A tyrant seizes power by manipulating the masses, ruling through fear and force. For Plato, tyranny is not only political, but psychological. The tyrannical soul is enslaved to unchecked desire, paranoia, and cruelty. The tyrant is the embodiment of internal disorder writ large in society. This cycle reflects the fragility of justice and the danger of unrestrained appetites both in individuals and communities. Plato's political philosophy, therefore, is a call for philosophical leadership, rulers guided by reason, trained in truth, and dedicated to the good. Only such governance can resist decay and maintain the harmony essential to justice. Part 4. Legacy and Challenges. Plato's Vision in the Modern World. Following on from our exploration of political decay and tyranny, we arrive at a deeper understanding of Plato's ultimate political aim, to create a state where reason governs, justice prevails, and citizens flourish. Plato's Callipolis remains a radical vision, a city rooted not in power struggles or wealth, but in wisdom and virtue. Its foundation rests on the idea that the health of the state depends on the virtue of its rulers and the order within each citizen's soul. Yet, despite its philosophical beauty, Plato's ideal state poses serious practical and ethical challenges. His proposals for communal property and family among guardians challenge deeply held beliefs about individual rights and freedoms. His rigid class divisions and emphasis on natural aptitude raise questions about social mobility and equality. Moreover, his distrust of democracy, a system that many today cherish as the best available form of governance, invites debate about the balance between freedom and order. Throughout history, thinkers have grappled with Plato's vision, praising its insight into justice and the soul, while criticizing its potential for authoritarianism. But Plato's legacy endures because his work invites us to ask fundamental questions. What is justice? Not just in laws, but in the soul and society. How should we structure communities to promote the good life? What is the role of knowledge and virtue in leadership? How do we balance freedom with order? His ideal state is less a political blueprint and more a philosophical challenge, to consider how our inner lives and our societies reflect one another, and how the pursuit of truth and justice can shape both. As we move forward, these questions remain deeply relevant, inviting us to reflect on our own times and the possibilities for harmony within ourselves and our communities. Chapter 4. Plato's Ethics and the Good Life. Part 1. The Foundation of Virtue. The Unity of the Soul. Plato's ethical philosophy flows naturally from his metaphysical and political insights. Having established the structure of the soul and the ideal organization of society, he turns to the question that has captivated philosophers for millennia. What is the good life? For Plato, the good life is inseparable from the soul's health. Virtue is the excellence of the soul, its proper functioning in harmony with reason, spirit, and appetite. This harmony enables the individual to live well and ultimately to be happy. Unlike some views that see virtue as a collection of separate traits, Plato insists on the unity of the virtues. Justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom are not isolated qualities, but aspects of a singular, harmonious condition of the soul. In Republic, Book 4, Socrates argues that when the soul is rightly ordered, when reason rules, supported by spirit and appetite obeys, all virtues follow naturally. The virtuous person does not have to struggle to be just or courageous. These qualities arise from the soul's unity. Virtue is knowledge for Plato. To know the good is to do the good. Vice arises from ignorance, when the soul is out of tune with the forms, especially the form of the good. Thus, the ethical life is a life of philosophical insight, self-mastery, and alignment with eternal truth. Part 2. Happiness and the Flourishing Soul. Following on from our discussion of virtue as the unity and harmony of the soul, Plato turns to the question of happiness, or eudaimonia, the flourishing and fulfillment of the human being. Unlike modern notions that equate happiness with pleasure or success, Plato's understanding is profound and holistic. Happiness is the natural result of living in accordance with reason and virtue. In Republic, Socrates insists that the just person is the happiest person, not because of external wealth or fame, but because justice cultivates inner peace and harmony. A soul ruled by reason enjoys freedom from internal conflict and the turmoil of unchecked desires. This state of inner harmony leads to psychological well-being, a kind of tranquility or ataraxia, where the soul is undisturbed by passions or fears. Moreover, Plato envisions happiness as an active state, not mere contentment, but the soul engaging fully in its proper function, seeking knowledge, loving truth, and participating wisely in the life of the city. Thus, happiness is inseparable from the pursuit of the good, which is the ultimate object of desire for the soul. Plato's ethical vision challenges us to reconsider what we value, urging us to see beyond transient pleasures toward the lasting fulfillment that comes from a well-ordered life. Part 3. The cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. We now turn to the cardinal virtues that constitute this order. Plato identifies 4 key virtues essential to the good life: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Wisdom resides primarily in the rational part of the soul. It is the virtue of those who govern their lives and societies through knowledge and understanding. Wisdom allows us to perceive the forms and make sound judgments aligned with the good. In the ideal city, it is the virtue of the rulers. Courage belongs to the spirited part of the soul. It is the steadfastness to face fears, endure hardships, and uphold what reason deems right. Courage is not mere bravado, but a reasoned commitment to virtue even in adversity. The auxiliaries embody courage in Plato's state. Temperance is the harmony and self-control that governs appetites and desires. It is the ability to moderate impulses, maintain discipline, and live in balance. Temperance prevents excess and fosters unity among the soul's parts. It is a virtue shared by all classes, but rooted in the producer's role. Finally, justice, the overarching virtue, is the state in which every part of the soul does its proper work without interfering with others. Justice is the condition of harmony and balance, both within the individual and society. It is the culmination of the other virtues working in concert. These virtues are deeply interconnected. None can flourish without the others, for the soul's health depends on their unity. For Plato, virtue is not a checklist, but a holistic condition of inner harmony, the foundation for a good and happy life. Part 4. The philosopher's life: the highest good and the pursuit of truth. For Plato, the philosopher is the person whose soul is most deeply aligned with reason and truth. Unlike those who chase fleeting pleasures or worldly success, the philosopher pursues knowledge of the forms, especially the form of the good, which illuminates all others. This pursuit is not idle contemplation, but an active and joyful engagement with reality, as it truly is. The philosopher loves wisdom not for personal gain, but because the truth itself is the highest object of desire. Living philosophically means ordering one's soul so that reason governs, spirit supports, and appetite follows. It means seeking harmony within oneself and justice in one's actions and relationships. The philosopher's life is marked by self-mastery, courage to face uncomfortable truths, and temperance in worldly matters. This life leads to the greatest happiness because it is the soul functioning at its best, fully actualized. In this way, ethics, politics, metaphysics, and epistemology come together in Plato's philosophy. The good life is the life of a just, knowledgeable soul engaged with the eternal truths beyond the shifting world of appearances. Chapter 5. Plato on Virtue, Eudaimonia, and the Soul's Ascent, Part 1. The Ethical Soul, Order, Harmony, and the Roots of the Good Life. Following on from our exploration of Plato's ideal state and the inner structure of the soul, we now turn to the ethical core of his philosophy, what it means to live well, to live justly, and to live in alignment with the good. For Plato, the good life is not found in wealth, fame, or indulgence, but in the inner harmony of a well-ordered soul, guided by reason and virtue. In the heart of Plato's ethics lies a deceptively simple question: what is it to live well? For modern audiences, this might invoke material comfort, pleasure, or freedom, but for Plato the answer is far more profound. and demanding. Living well means living in accordance with one's true nature. And since, for Plato, the true nature of the soul is rational and immortal, the good life is one in which the soul is in harmony with itself and oriented toward the eternal truths, especially the form of the good. To reach this harmony, each part of the tripartite soul must fulfill its proper function. Reason must rule, discerning truth and directing the whole. Spirit must support reason, energizing moral convictions and resisting injustice. Appetite must be governed, desiring only what is appropriate and proportionate. When these parts are in balance, the individual is virtuous, and from this virtue arises a profound and lasting sense of fulfillment, not the fleeting joy of momentary pleasures, but the deep stability of a soul in tune with its highest purpose. This, for Plato, is eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but more accurately understood as human flourishing or blessedness. It is the state in which one's life is aligned with reason, justice, and the eternal order of the cosmos. To reach eudaimonia requires more than good intentions. It requires philosophical training, moral education, and a lifelong discipline of the self. Plato's ethical ideal is in many ways an elite one. It is a calling to those capable of rising above instinct and convention, to perceive the form of the good and live by its light. Virtue, arete, then, is not simply a matter of following rules. It is an excellence of the soul, a condition in which all elements function together as they should. The good person is not merely law-abiding or nice. They are well-formed, and thus well-equipped to act rightly in all situations. In the same way that health is the natural state of a properly functioning body, virtue is the natural state of a properly functioning soul. And just as illness in the body results from imbalance or obstruction, vice is a sickness of the soul, a misalignment of its parts, a failure to know and love what is truly good. Part 2. Eudaimonia and the tyranny within. Why the just soul is the happiest. Continuing from the idea that virtue is the soul's proper functioning, we now explore Plato's view of happiness, not as pleasure, but as a state of deep harmony. We also contrast the flourishing of the just soul with the chaos and suffering of the unjust, particularly in the figure of the tyrant. For Plato, the ethical question, why should I be just, is not answered by external rewards or divine promises. Instead, it is answered by an appeal to the very structure of the soul. Justice, in Plato's moral psychology, is intrinsically fulfilling. It feels good to be rightly ordered. This is the essence of eudaimonia, a state of inner alignment where the soul is governed by reason, supported by spirit, and served by appetite. It is a condition in which one's desires are not at war with one another, and one's actions flow from a unified sense of purpose. In Republic Book 9, Plato introduces one of his most vivid ethical arguments. He compares the soul of the just person with that of the tyrant. The tyrant, who appears powerful and enviable to many, is in fact the most miserable of all. Why? Because his soul is in a state of complete disorder. He is ruled not by reason, but by a multitude of lawless appetites. He is enslaved to fear, suspicion, and the never-ending chase for pleasure, dominance, and security. He trusts no one, loves nothing, and knows no peace. The just person, by contrast, enjoys inner peace. Their rational part governs calmly, setting goals aligned with the good. Their spirited element enforces discipline and courage. Their appetites follow, satisfied but not ravenous. This soul is healthy, and from health flows true joy. Plato uses 3 key analogies to make his case. The city-soul analogy. Just as a city is happiest when its classes are in harmony, so too is a person when their soul is well governed. The beast-tyrant comparison. The tyrant, Plato says, is like a many-headed beast, a chaos of conflicting urges, unable to reason or rest. The true versus false pleasures. The philosopher experiences the highest pleasures, intellectual and spiritual, while the tyrant chases lower pleasures that bring only temporary satisfaction and long-term pain. Plato's ethical worldview therefore links justice, happiness, and self-knowledge in a powerful way. He insists that we do not live well unless we understand our soul's nature and live in accordance with it. This is no easy task. It requires the discipline of philosophy and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It also means rejecting the seductive, but ultimately hollow, life of the unjust person, especially the tyrant who may rule others but is enslaved by himself. Part 3. Justice, dikaiosine, the soul in right order. Justice is not just another virtue, it is the culmination and condition of the other three. Justice exists when each part of the soul does its own work and does not meddle in the work of others. In Plato's words, justice is minding one's own business, not in the selfish sense, but in the metaphysical sense of functioning according to one's nature. In the city, justice ensures each class remains in its lane, creating social order. In the soul, justice is the state of internal unity where reason rules, spirit defends, and appetite obeys. Justice is the virtue that makes the soul whole. Each of the four virtues is essential. Without wisdom, we are blind. Without courage, we are weak. Without temperance, we are lost in indulgence. Without justice, we are divided within ourselves. Together, they form the foundation of eudaimonia, the flourishing of a soul that is healthy, whole, and free. Part 4. The ascent of the soul, toward the good and the philosopher's life. For Plato, the ethical life culminates in something far beyond social conformity or personal satisfaction. The truly good life is not only virtuous, it is philosophical. It is a life of ascent, a movement upward from illusion to truth, from shadows to substance, from the sensible world to the intelligible realm. In the Republic, Book 7, Plato gives us the famous allegory of the cave, a metaphor for this ascent. Most people, he says, live like prisoners in a cave, mistaking shadows on the wall for reality. They live by convention, by opinion, by fleeting pleasures. The philosopher, however, turns around. Through education and reflection, they begin to climb out of the cave. At first, the light hurts their eyes, but slowly they adjust, and eventually they behold the sun, the form of the good, the source of all truth, all beauty, and all justice. This vision of the good is the final goal of the soul. It is what gives life coherence and direction. It is what makes knowledge possible and virtue intelligible. It is the unifying principle behind all that is noble and worthwhile. The philosopher, unlike others, does not live for reputation, wealth, or comfort. They live in the service of truth. They cultivate the soul, not just to be good, but to see clearly, to love deeply, and to act justly in light of what is eternal. This is why Plato insists that the philosopher is the happiest of all, not because they avoid suffering, but because they live in accordance with their highest nature. They are at peace with themselves and the cosmos. And yet, the philosopher's life is not one of escape. Having seen the truth, they must return to the cave. They must guide others. They must govern, if called, not for glory, but because justice demands it. Their knowledge creates responsibility, and their virtue becomes service. In this final vision, we see how Plato unites ethics, politics, and metaphysics. The good life is not just about inner peace or social order. It is about becoming the kind of soul that reflects the eternal, participates in the divine, and leads others toward the light. It is, above all, a life of love, love of wisdom, love of truth, and love of the good. Chapter 6. The Education of the Soul. Part 1. Following on from our exploration of virtue and the philosopher's ascent toward the good, We now turn to the path that leads the soul there, education, or paideia. For Plato, education is not about filling the mind with facts, but about transforming the soul from darkness to light. In the Platonic worldview, the soul is not a blank slate, but an immortal essence with the capacity for truth already within it. Yet in the embodied world, the world of change and illusion, the soul often forgets this truth. It becomes distracted, fragmented, and misled by appearances. Education, then, is the process by which the soul is gradually guided back to its true nature. It is not simply intellectual training, but spiritual recollection, a drawing out of what the soul already knows, dimly and intuitively. Plato calls this process anamnesis, remembrance. In Meno, Socrates famously demonstrates this idea with a slave boy, showing that through questioning alone, the boy can arrive at geometrical truths. This suggests that knowledge is not implanted from without, but drawn out from within. This vision of education reaches its highest expression in the Republic, particularly in books 6 and 7, where Plato outlines the curriculum of the philosopher king, a long and arduous journey that stretches over decades. The goal is not just to produce wise rulers, but to turn the entire soul toward the good. The first stage, gymnastics and music. The education of the guardians begins in childhood, with a careful balance of gymnastics and music, not just in the literal sense, but as metaphors for bodily discipline and cultural formation. Gymnastics shapes the body, cultivating strength, endurance, and courage. Music, in Plato's broader sense, shapes the soul, through poetry, storytelling, and harmony. But this early education must be carefully curated. Plato is famously cautious about exposing children to the wrong myths, the wrong rhythms, the wrong stories. He fears that the goal is to create order and rhythm in the soul, to habituate the guardians to love the noble, to fear dishonor, and to feel pleasure in truth rather than deception. This stage forms the ethical groundwork upon which philosophical training will later be built. Part 2. The ascent begins. Mathematics, dialectic, and the turning of the soul. Now that we have seen how music and gymnastics prepare the soul in childhood, we turn to the later stages of Plato's philosophical education. The intellectual ascent toward truth. This path begins with mathematics, but culminates in dialectic, the soul's deepest engagement with being itself. For Plato, the goal of education is to liberate the soul from the shadows, to turn it away from the world of becoming and lead it toward the world of being. This movement is gradual, structured, and deeply transformative. After the early training in music and physical discipline, the next phase of education introduces the future philosopher to the mathematical sciences, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and harmonics. But these subjects are not studied for practical utility. They are chosen for their ability to train the mind to think abstractly, to grasp unchanging truths, and to move beyond the senses. Each subject plays a distinct role. Arithmetic teaches the soul to think in terms of pure quantity, detached from physical objects. Geometry cultivates the understanding of spatial relationships, lines, planes, and forms that do not exist in the visible world but in thought. Astronomy lifts the gaze to the heavens, but not to admire the stars for their beauty, rather, to understand their rational order. Harmonics reveals the underlying ratios that govern musical intervals, reminding the student that beauty has a mathematical structure. Plato's aim here is clear: to shift the soul's attention from what is seen to what is intelligible, from phenomena to principles, from data to form. Dialectic, the supreme discipline. Above all these sciences stands dialectic, which Plato calls the coping stone of the educational process. Dialectic is not mere debate or cleverness, It is the art of questioning, of reasoning upward, from hypotheses to first principles, until the soul reaches the form of the good. It is through dialectic that the soul begins to see the unity of all knowledge, to trace every discipline back to a single source, and to understand the relationships among all forms. In Republic, Book 7, Plato describes dialectic as the moment when the soul turns around, a phrase that recalls the allegory of the cave. Education is not about filling the mind with information, but about reorienting the soul's entire vision away from shadows and toward light. The dialectician is one who refuses to accept assumptions blindly. They ask, what is justice? What is beauty? What is truth? And they do not stop until they see clearly. This clarity is hard won. Dialectic can be unsettling, even dangerous if approached too early. That is why Plato recommends that dialectic be introduced only after years of ethical and mathematical training. Without stability in the soul, dialectic can produce cynicism or confusion. But when used properly, it is the key to freedom, the final unlocking of the soul's potential. Part 3, the allegory of the cave, education as liberation. Having seen the role of mathematics and dialectic in reorienting the soul, we now return to Plato's most iconic image of education, the allegory of the cave. In this myth, education is not the acquisition of facts, but a painful journey from illusion to reality, from darkness to light, from ignorance to truth. In Republic Book 7, Plato asks us to imagine a dark, underground cave. Inside it are human beings, chained by the legs and neck since childhood. They cannot move, cannot turn their heads. All they can see is the wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire burns. Between the fire and the prisoners is a raised walkway, along which others pass carrying statues and artifacts. The fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the wall before the prisoners, and because they have never seen anything else, they believe these shadows to be reality. This, Plato says, is the condition of the uneducated soul. It lives in a world of appearances, mistaking opinions for knowledge and sensory impressions for truth. Now imagine one prisoner is freed. At first, he is confused. When he turns to face the fire, the light hurts his eyes. He resists. He does not want to leave. But slowly he is drawn upward, out of the cave, into the daylight. At first he sees only shadows and reflections. Then he begins to see real objects, trees, animals, the sky. Finally he gazes upon the sun itself, the source of all light, all life, all knowledge. The sun represents the form of the good. Plato's point is profound. Education is a kind of spiritual struggle. It involves pain, disorientation, and even resistance, but it is also liberation. It is the soul's journey from ignorance to understanding. Shadows, opinions, and the world of becoming. The cave is more than a metaphor for ignorance. It is a portrait of ordinary life. Most people, Plato believes, live in a kind of mental captivity. They trust what they see. They believe what they are told. They form opinions, but never examine them. They accept the world as it appears, and so they remain in the cave. This applies not just to the uneducated, but even to those who are successful by worldly standards. Wealth, reputation, and power mean nothing if the soul is turned away from truth. In today's terms, we might say that Plato is warning against living a life on autopilot, unexamined, reactive, and shaped by illusions. The shadows on the wall are everywhere. Media, gossip, social convention, political propaganda. The philosopher is the one who questions the source of the shadows, who turns around, and who refuses to mistake imitation for reality. Part 4. The philosopher's return, sharing the light and governing justly. Plato's education does not end in solitary contemplation. The philosopher must return to the cave, to the world of shadows, to guide and govern with wisdom and compassion. In Republic, Book 7, Plato describes the difficult path of the enlightened individual, who, having seen the form of the good, chooses not to remain in blissful isolation, but to descend once more into the cave. This return is not easy. The prisoners still chained below cannot comprehend the light. They may ridicule or resist the freed one's message. The philosopher risks alienation, misunderstanding, even persecution. Yet, for Plato, this descent is the highest act of justice and virtue. The philosopher king leads the city, not for personal glory or wealth, but out of responsibility to the common good. Leadership rooted in knowledge and virtue. Plato's ideal ruler is one who combines wisdom and moral integrity, who understands the forms and has cultivated the virtues within the soul. Only such a person is fit to govern justly. This vision rejects rule by wealth, birthright, or popularity. Instead, leadership is a burden borne by those best equipped, the philosopher kings, trained through lifelong education and self-discipline. Their governance reflects the same harmony found within the just soul. Reason guiding courage and temperance, producing justice in the city, the ethical imperative to educate others. Plato also extends the metaphor to the entire community. The philosopher's duty is to educate the citizens, to help free them from the chains of ignorance. Education, then, is a public good, essential for the health of the polis. It is the path to justice and happiness, not just for the individual, but for society as a whole. This completes Plato's vision of the good life, not as a private pursuit, but as a shared project. The philosopher ascends to the good and returns to lead others upward. Chapter 7. Plato's Aesthetics. The form of beauty and the soul's response. Part 1. Beauty in the realm of forms, eternal, unchanging, and divine. Following our previous exploration of Plato's metaphysics and ethics, we now turn to a realm where philosophy and human experience meet intimately, the world of beauty. For Plato, beauty is not merely subjective or fleeting. It is a transcendent form, one of the highest and most powerful realities. In Plato's philosophical universe, the forms are perfect, eternal archetypes that exist beyond space and time. They are the true realities of which the physical world is but an imperfect shadow. Among these forms, beauty, to kalon, holds a special place. It is not simply about pleasing appearances or decoration. It is the essence of harmony, proportion, and truth itself. Beauty, for Plato, is deeply intertwined with goodness and truth. The three together form a triad of ultimate values. The nature of beauty. When we encounter something beautiful, a sunset, a statue, a melody, Plato teaches that we are momentarily catching a glimpse of the eternal form of beauty. These beautiful things participate in beauty. They reflect it imperfectly, but enough to move the soul. The experience of beauty is therefore not merely sensory, it is intellectual and spiritual. Beauty calls the soul upward, away from mere material concerns and toward contemplation of the divine. In Phaedrus, Plato describes this experience as a kind of awakening, the soul remembering its origin in the realm of forms and yearning to return. Beauty, truth, and the good. Plato's triad, beauty, truth, and the good, can be thought of as three facets of the same ultimate reality. To know the beautiful is to know the true and the good. The philosopher's love of beauty is not frivolous. It is a powerful, motivating force in the quest for wisdom. Beauty inspires the soul to seek knowledge and virtue, guiding it toward its highest fulfillment. This connection explains why, in Plato's view, art and aesthetics cannot be dismissed as mere entertainment. They touch something profound in the human condition, the soul's deep desire for the eternal and the perfect. Part 2. Love and Eros, the soul's journey toward beauty. In the Symposium, Plato presents love not merely as romantic affection, but as a powerful spiritual yearning. Eros is the desire that moves the soul from the love of particular beautiful things toward the love of beauty itself. the eternal and unchanging, the ladder of love. Plato describes this ascent metaphorically as a ladder of love, scala amoris. It begins with physical attraction to a single beautiful body, but true lovers do not remain fixated here. Step by step, the soul ascends from love of one beautiful body to love of all beautiful bodies, from physical beauty to the beauty of minds and souls, from individual souls to the beauty found in laws, knowledge, and institutions, finally to the contemplation of beauty itself, the form of beauty, eternal and perfect. This ladder illustrates how eros transforms from a personal sensory impulse into a philosophical quest. Eros as a creative and motivating force. Eros is not merely desire, it is also creative. It inspires the soul to seek truth, to produce virtue, and even to create art or ideas that echo beauty's perfection. In this light, love becomes the engine of intellectual and moral growth. It connects the earthly with the divine, the transient with the eternal, the role of the soul in recognizing beauty. Plato sees the soul as originally having known the forms before its embodiment in the physical world. The experience of beauty in the world stirs the soul's recollection, anamnesis, reminding it of its true home. Thus, love and beauty awaken the soul's deepest memories and inspire it to return to the realm of truth. Part 3. Art, Poetry and Imitation. Plato's Critique and Caution. Having explored beauty as an eternal form and eros, as the soul's ladder toward the divine, we now turn to Plato's ambivalent stance on art and poetry, especially his concerns about imitation, mimesis, and its effects on the soul. In Republic Books 2 and 10, Plato famously critiques poets and artists for their role as imitators of appearances rather than truth. He argues that art is thrice removed from reality, the three levels of reality and imitation. Plato distinguishes between the form, the perfect eternal reality, e.g., the form of a bed; the particular, a physical bed, an imperfect copy of the form; the image, a painting or representation of the bed, which is an imitation of the imitation. Artworks, therefore, are copies of copies. While a physical bed participates in the form of bedness, a painting merely copies the bed's appearance, and thus is furthest from truth. The moral danger of imitation. Plato worries that art appeals primarily to the appetitive and irrational parts of the soul. Poetry and drama, with their stirring emotions, can inflame passions and distort reason. He particularly criticizes tragic poetry for encouraging vice and moral confusion by glamorizing immoral behavior and evoking pity or fear without offering true understanding. The role of art in education and society. Despite his critiques, Plato does not dismiss art outright. In the Republic, he proposes a censored and carefully controlled artistic culture, one that promotes virtues, harmony, and truth. Art must serve the education of the soul, inspiring temperance, courage, and justice. It should lead the soul upward, not drag it down into base emotions. The paradox of beauty and imitation. This presents a paradox. Art is a kind of imitation, yet beauty is real and powerful. Plato's solution is that only art which participates in truth and uplifts the soul is worthwhile. Artists must align themselves with the philosopher's quest, seeking to reveal, not obscure, the eternal forms through their creations. Part 4. The soul's experience of beauty, inspiration, and the philosophical life. Following our exploration of art and imitation, we conclude by reflecting on how beauty moves the soul, inspiring philosophy itself and the soul's highest fulfillment. For Plato, the experience of beauty is transformative. When the soul encounters true beauty, whether in nature, art, or thought, it feels a profound uplift, a stirring that calls it beyond the mundane. This experience awakens the soul's desire for wisdom, truth, and goodness, Beauty becomes the gateway through which the soul ascends toward the divine. Beauty as a motivating force. Unlike fleeting pleasures, beauty offers a lasting nourishment for the soul. It cultivates harmony within, aligns the soul's parts, and invites the soul to contemplate higher realities. Philosophers, drawn irresistibly to beauty, find in it the motivation to pursue knowledge and virtue, a lifelong journey of growth and transformation, the unity of beauty, truth, and goodness. In this final harmony, Plato unites his three great ideals. Beauty is not separate from truth or goodness. Rather, it reflects their unity. To love beauty is to love truth and goodness, a love that leads the soul ever upward. In the grand architecture of Plato's thought, beauty is more than an aesthetic category. It is a central pillar of the philosophical life, the radiant light that draws the soul from shadow to reality. As we rest in this awareness, may we too be gently inspired to awaken the soul's deepest longing for the eternal, the true, and the beautiful. Drawing this journey through Plato's thought to a close, we see the profound legacy he has left us. A vision of philosophy as a lifelong ascent toward truth, beauty, and the good. His teachings invite us to examine our souls, to seek harmony within, and to turn from shadows toward the light of understanding. Through his dialogues, Plato shaped the very foundations of Western philosophy, inspiring thinkers for millennia to explore the mysteries of knowledge, reality, and virtue. As you settle into rest, may these ancient insights gently lull your mind and heart, inviting peace, reflection, and a quiet awakening. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be as deep and illuminating as the wisdom of Plato himself.